So recently I was working on a project for which I needed to do some performance testing. Now, for my normal day-to-day activities, the phone that I have right now works just fine for me, especially nowadays since I'm always working from home. We're still under lockdown, so with not leaving the house that much, I have found that I really don't need my phone for too much. So there's not much of an advantage for me right now to getting a new one. But for what I needed to test, I need to have access to a good implementation of NN API, the neural network API. Now, the phone I have right now, technically it has the hardware that's needed, but it doesn't have the drivers that are necessary to take full advantage of it. So, in order to compensate for that, or in order to do my testing, there's really three solutions that were available to me. One is to get a new phone, which I don't really feel like doing right now. Another solution is I could root my device, compile the drivers, install the drivers, and then it would be good to go. But if I root my device, there's actually some other functionality that ends up getting disabled. I look at that as more or less damaging my device, which I don't want to do. And a third solution is to use someone else's device that happens to meet the requirements. One thing you might notice is that I didn't mention the emulator. That's because the emulator, while it is representational of functionality, it is not representational of performance. The performance that you get out of the emulator is going to be based off of the PC that you're running it on. And that in no way would tell me the information that I needed to gather. The solution I ended up using was a variation of using someone else's device. And it really came down to using one of Samsung's devices. They have what they call the Samsung Remote Testing Lab set up. And with this lab, you're able to log into real hardware, deploy your applications, and control it over a web connection. Now, this is not a substitute for physically holding a device. There are some things that you can't do, even though you're accessing real hardware. But for the testing scenarios that I was looking at, this is going to work out just fine. And just to let you know, the types of things that you would not be able to use this for is if you had anything that involved like physical manipulation of the device. And that's because the devices are bolted into something in some other state or some other country, depending on which ones that you're using. So you can't make use of that. You can make use of the camera and a microphone, but if you do that, you're more or less just going to be getting a lot of noise. You can hear the fans of the server rooms that the devices are in, but you would not be able to test, say, if you want to do voice recognition. But recognizing that those limitations, for the most part, I found that it was good for some of the scenarios I was looking at. Now, before you get started, your computer has to meet the requirements. The requirements are pretty simple. You need to have a Java VM that supports Java Web Start. Just an FYI, if you're using this commercially, right now the latest version of the Java VM available from Oracle, the company that owns Java, that requires a subscription. So you might want to go and use one of the other open implementations of Java instead, unless your company plans on purchasing a subscription. If you're doing this for home use, then you can probably go ahead and use the latest version under the agreement that is for individuals. But in addition to having a Java VM, your network also needs to have port 2600 open. For home users, that shouldn't be a problem. If you're on a corporate network that is configured pessimistically, which I've been on a few before, where they only allow traffic over pre-approved ports, and that's something that you need to speak with your IT person about. But given that you meet both of these requirements, you're good to go. So you could use this on a Linux machine, you could use this on Mac OS X, you could use this on Windows. It just needs to meet those two requirements. So provided that you meet those requirements, let's go ahead and go to the Samsung Remote Testing Labs website and take a look at what their solution looks like. This is the URL that you go to connect to the Samsung Remote Test Lab. It's just developer.samsung.com/remote-test-lab. Now you do need a Samsung account in order to log in, but a Samsung account is free. Nothing that I'm showing you from here on is going to cost you anything. But when you first log in, or when you first go to this URL, if you select one of the devices, and they always have some set of featured devices that are up here. When you select one, If you weren't already signed in, then that's when you'll get a prompt to be signed in. Now, since I'm already signed in, it skipped past that and it took me to where I needed to go. Now, by default, Galaxy is selected on the left. You can see there's a few other classes of devices here. The watch, that's for the Tizen wearable devices that they have, so you can use those on remote testing. Z is for the Tizen mobile, which we never really saw in the United States, and I don't think they're making those anymore anyway. But for the most part, you're going to end up spending, if you're doing Android, you're going to end up spending most of your time in the Galaxy tab, which has all of their Android devices here. Now, most of these are clustered by the screen resolution. We can see that they have all of the foldable ones at the top, but then after that, it just goes by screen resolution. Now, before we dive into using any of these devices, I want you to take note that when you're using these devices, I said this doesn't cost you anything, and it doesn't cost you any type of currency. You are given a resource that you have to trade for using any of these devices, and that is the credits. Every time you log, or every day that you log into the Samsung Remote Test Labs, you get 20 credits that you can use for devices. Now, each credit is worth 15 minutes worth of device use. You can use up to 10 hours on a device within a day. So you see I have 106 credits over here. If you divide that by 4, then that is about 26 hours worth of device time that I can use, but I just can't use all of it in one day, of course. Now, when you select a device, or before you go into the device, there's a few settings that you can change. The first one that's visible here is how much time that you want to reserve a device for. For most of the devices, you can select between 30 minutes to 2 hours and 15-minute increments. For some of their premium devices, it's only either 30 minutes or an hour. So you would select how long you plan to use the device. And actually, I'll use the Galaxy Note Ultra because I've been on this one before. So you select how long you plan to use it. And so there's a list of devices that are available. The last few characters tell you what country that is in, like KR, you can tell that's in Korea, US is United States. I don't know what PL stands for, but you want to try and select the one that's closest to you. Presumably, you'll end up with less latency with one that shows as being in a closer country to you. So I wanted to use US 2, but someone's on there right now, and it's another 13 minutes till it frees up. So I'll go ahead and I'll select US 1. The other thing that you want to select is the Android version. Now, for some of these, it only shows one Android version. There are some other devices that when they were released into one Android version, but then later upgraded to another. So in instances of devices where something like that happened, you can select the specific Android version that you wanted. But for something that's been on one Android version for all of its life thus far, that'll be the only setting. Now, after you select all 3 of these, I'm going to change this to an hour. After you select all 3 of these, you can hit start and it's going to download the JNLP. Oh, before I go in, there's a few things that you want to keep in mind. Now, these are shared devices. When you log off of a device, signs that you were there will persist. So you want to be a good tenant and make sure that you clean up before you disconnect from the device. So this means clearing the web history. If you uploaded any files, just go ahead and delete those. From what I've seen, if I install an application from my own APK, when I disconnect, that application seems to automatically get uninstalled. But other traces that I was on the device do not get removed. Don't log into any accounts on the device. And there are some other things that they tell you not to do. For instance, you don't want to go into this and set a device password because that can hinder the next person that comes along. And if you do that, you can actually find your account just being locked out from being able to access these for violating their terms of service. But I've selected all of my settings, just giving me the requirements. You need to have at least Java runtime environment, port 2600, so on. But when I hit start, it's going to download a JNLP. Yes, I do want to keep this file. Now, these files are Java executables, which is part of the reason why I'm getting a warning. Of course, your browser is going to warn you whenever you're downloading an executable. But now that I've downloaded it, I can go ahead and, just open it. And it doesn't want me to open it that way because it's from an unidentified developer. Okay, well, that's not a big deal. Let's see. Let me find my download. And open with Java Web Start. So it takes a few moments to open. I'll be prompted for a security prompt. It doesn't matter if you check this box or not, because if you connect to another device later on, it's going to be a different JNLP file, which it's not going to be recognized as the same, and you'll end up getting that prompt again. So it takes a few moments to get connected, and here we are connected. And once again, it's warning you, don't put personal information on here, don't leave any passwords, remove all traces of your activity, and just warning you the device can be reset at any time, and you can be restricted from accessing these devices if you lock them with a pin. So I understand this and I wish to continue. English is my language, and here I am. I'm now connected to the device. The device is turned off. Let's hit the power button to turn the screen on. Click and drag. And now we're in. Now, the first thing I want to point out is there's a number of menus you can get into by right-clicking. The first setting I want to change is to change the quality of the screen, because that just looks a little pixelated. So changing it to high, this just looks a lot better. There are a lot of other functions that you end up accessing through here, and we'll take a quick look through them. So on the screen, while you can't physically move the device, you can change the screen orientation from here. Scale, I'm fine leaving that alone. Input mode. And for input mode, you can see this is between a finger and an S pen. If you're using a mouse that has a middle button, you can also change the modes by clicking on that middle button. You can capture the screen, record a video. If you record a video, I found it just kind of dumps that into your local user folder. It does not tell you, well, actually, I've never done it before. Let's do save folder. Okay, so I can change that. But by default, it's just dumping things into your local user folder. I want to change this to movies. Okay, so I'm changing this to movies, because if I do anything, I'm going to download video there. I see my screen's turned off again, but worry about that later. So with Manage, this is where you can install an application, access the clipboard, upload and download files, and if you see something with a network connection, you go here and you just reset the network connection. So on test, this is where you can install an application. I've never tried the auto repeat. Logs. I'll show this. This pretty much looks like the same screen that you'd see by using logcat or the log function within Android Studio. Some licensing information. If you click on exit, then that will disconnect you from the device and log you out. So let's get this unlocked again. By just clicking around here, you can see this is like a normal Android device, because it is a normal Android device. And I can see evidence of whoever was here before. So don't know what they were doing. Let me just go ahead and clear their history, just so that it's not in here with me. Oops. Okay, so going to privacy, clear browsing data, and yes, let's just clear everything. Okay, so now that that's done, if I back out, let's just go to Samsung.com. Okay, so that is where I'm going to leave the browser. But you can see you can more or less use this like it is any other device. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Okay. Now, if you're accessing this only because you're trying to test someone else's application, let's say that you just happen to have an APK for their application. You go to wherever that APK is stored. And in this, I'm going to test this little application where all it really does is for a conversation starting application where it will select from various topics, and people could choose something to randomly talk about. And I've gone a step too far. Okay, build, outputs, APKs, debug. So here's the APK I want to test. So I select it, open, and it uploads to the remote device. Now while it's uploaded, it hasn't been installed just yet. And actually I don't see it in here yet. Let's see, I think I've done something wrong. Let's do this again. Okay, bit of a hard cut there. Something that happens every so often is sometimes the interface just suddenly goes non-responsive. If that happens, you can just close the interface, open it back up. Things are exactly the way that you left it. So it happens every so often. Not something I like, but it's not something that in any way makes this unusable. Let's say that you were testing an application and someone has given you an APK. So you want to get that uploaded and installed. The way you would do that is you would right click on the interface, select Test, Install Application. This opens up an Applications window. So here I've navigated to the location of the APK that I wish to install. I select it, open. Okay, it's uploaded, and it shows me applications list. You can see it at the bottom, and it's in a different color than all the other applications. Showing up in green means that it's there and ready to be installed, but it has not been installed yet. And you can see that it is in fact not there yet by, let's unlock the screen, application list. So this is the end of the application list. It's not there yet. To complete the installation, I have to click on it and select install. And it only takes a few moments. The app's been installed, and we can see that now the icon shows up for it. So now that it's installed, I could go ahead and start running it and do whatever tests I need to do there. Let me uninstall it. To uninstall it, just from the same list, make sure it's highlighted, click on uninstall, and it's gone. Now I could have also done the long press and selected uninstall from the menu in order to accomplish the same thing. But let's say that your actual plan is you want to deploy and debug. So let's see, in order to do that, we start the remote debug bridge. Now it'll give you a command and tell you, type this in. We can see that it has remote debug bridge on port 55877 in this case. So let me open up a terminal. And I can just type in exactly what they have. Now, of course, you need to make sure that ADB is already in your path so that when you type that command, it will be routed to the right executable. So connect to localhost port 55877. Oh, one other thing I forgot. When you do this, you want to make sure the device is unlocked because you saw that error that I got about unable to authenticate. Let's disconnect and do that again. Okay, connect. And when I connect, that's when you get a prompt to allow this computer to connect. So I hit allow. Okay, and now it's connected. And show you it's connected. If I go into Android Studio now. Okay, so the drop down for my deploy targets just changed, and you can see the Samsung SM N986U. This resolves to the Galaxy Note 20 Ultra. So now it's connected to that device, pretty much as though I had the device that physically right here and connected to it. And so once again, just to show you, let's do this. Just to show you that this is really connected, I'm going to hit debug on my application. So it goes through its build, it starts the deployment, which is installing to this device. And in a few moments, we'll see the application start up, but also if I back out of it, then you'll see the application is installed too. So when you're using a remote debug, there's not much of a difference in how you would use that for a device that's physically connected versus using this device that's connected remotely. Okay, so it's connected, and it just timed out. Let's turn that back on. Okay, so it's connected, and all this application does is it just presents some people conversation starters. So I'm going to go into this category. I think I only have 2 questions in there. They see summer or winter. Oops, and I still have breakpoints in here. Like I said, this works exactly like the real thing. So let's get rid of that breakpoint, tell it to continue. Okay, what's the best thing to do on a cold day? And I think that's my last question. Oh no, I actually have more questions in this category. So I'll just step through this until I get to the last question. And while that's going on, let's open up the logs. So that was the last question. Let's turn this back to debug. Okay, that's a little quieter. Okay, so next question. This is the last one. Should dump out of here now. Let's get rid of that because that's in my way. Let's go through that one more time. Now with the log window open. And this must be the version of the application I have that was not generating log output. A quick interjection while I'm editing this on a PC. When I was looking at the video, I realized that the logs actually were coming across. I just needed to scroll down to see them. So just to show you that you can see the logs on a remote device while using local Android Studio, I'll start up the application again. And so it's compiling, deploying right now. And so here I've started the application. You can see the logs that are coming across. Right now there's no internet connection on this device, but you can see that these come across. Something else that you might want to do is you might need to upload and download files. If you are on, at least whenever I've used it on a PC, if I go into manage files, it will open a file explorer and I can copy the files as though they're on a local computer. If I try and do that from a Mac, I will get this kind of error, and this is telling me that I need to use an FTP application and connect to this address, which is my local host, and this port. So I'm doing this for my Windows PC, since Windows PC happens to have FTP managers built in. So I selected File Manager and it just opened up a window off screen. When I was using this before, it just appeared to be integrated into the Explorer, but then after looking at it on a Mac, that's when I realized that, okay, it is actually connecting to this via FTP from the built-in FTP client that is a part of the File Explorer. And so you could navigate and go into these folders just as you would if this were connected to your device with USB. As far as other features go, I mentioned you don't have physical access to this device, but what if you needed to change the orientation? Usually you'd just be able to turn your device sideways. Let's disconnect the debug bridge. Yes, I'm sure I'm gonna quit. Usually you would just be able to, let me go back to the application list and open up something that works in both orientations. Okay, so the browser works in either portrait or landscape orientation. If I wanted to change the orientation that it's in, I can just right click, select screen, and change the orientation to landscape. And it's been rotated. Now one thing I have found from this is if I let the screen time out from here and then go back into it, the device goes back into portrait mode, but it stays oriented on its side. If that happens, you can easily fix that just by toggling the orientation a couple of times, and then it's back to the way that you need it. On some of the other devices, the foldable devices that is, you might wonder, how do you get it from the folded to the unfolded state? For that, there's something else in the UI that they add that you can click on that will change it from open to closed state. Let's unlock it again. And so I also mentioned that if you needed to change it to S Pen mode, the only thing that you need to do is if you have a middle mouse button, you can just click on it. I'm using a Mac here, so I don't have a middle mouse button. But I can just go to input mode, select S Pen. So it acts like I just pulled the S Pen out. Let's do screen write. And it's taking a screenshot, and now I can start writing on it. It shows a bit of lag there, but once again, for testing, this is perfectly fine. That was a walk through the Samsung Remote Testing Labs. So this is something that I found useful for my scenario, since I was using an older device, but I need to test something on a newer device. Similarly, I can also think of scenarios where someone might also have a new device, but they might not have every variation of device on which they'd like to test their software. For example, you might have the newest Ultra, but you want to see how something works on one of the foldable phones. Or even if you have a foldable phone, there's like 3 different versions of those. You might want to try it out differently on each one of those. So it's something that I found to be useful. I think other people could find it useful too. So that's where I'm going to end this video. But I'd also like to point out that in addition to publishing here on YouTube, I also put out content on a blog, and I also put videos out on Instagram. So for both Instagram and for Twitter, you can find me under the username J2INET, and my blog address is, as you might be able to guess, j2i.net. So you can find me there. I usually put content out about every other week or so. usually leaning towards development, but always something technology related. So until next time.